Good morning and welcome to Victory on this snowy, blizzardy morning where hopefully you're all watching from the comfort and safety and warmth of your own homes as we're opting to do services this way kind of last minute due to the inclement weather outside. So I hope wherever you're watching that this finds you well. I want to let you know about what's going to be happening during this online service today. We're in week 4 of Come and See for Yourself. Hopefully this will take anywhere from about 45 minutes to 50 minutes in that ballpark. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a replay of some worship that we had in the last few weeks. Because they're songs that we were going to choose anyway if you had been here with us in person. So we'll get that going. We'll worship together virtually, and then we're going to hear from our NextGen area about what God's been doing there and the impacts going on in that area of the church. As well as we're going to move into Josh's sermon, and he prepared it. We filmed it a couple days ago just on the off chance that we might not have services in person, and so we'll play that for you. And we'd love for you to be able to follow along in the note section of the Victory app if you'd like to take notes and follow along if you're that kind of person and you like to remember things better that way. Speaking of the Victory app, if you are new, we would love you to download that app. Let us know you're here. Create an account. You can scan the QR code that'll be up here on the screen. And if you are a returning watcher, viewer of our normal services, we'd still like to know who's here and who's participating with us. So get on that app, check in, let us know you're here. This really does help us kind of keep track of everybody and know how to care for people. So if you would, go ahead and do that on the Victory app. Again, you can scan that on the QR code. And if you're new and if you don't want to do any of that, just text NEW to 317-576-2288, and one of us would be happy to get a hold of you and continue the conversation there. All right, so each week we try to share the top 3, and so the top 3 things that you need to know, which is on the website at victorycc.life or again in that Victory app. The top 3 are the 3 most important things that are going on in our church family this week. We know that schedules are crazy. There's a lot to keep track of, a lot of noise out there. So our top 3 is the quickest way for you just to find out the top 3 things happening this week that you should probably be aware of. So first off, we've got IF Gathering 2026. It's our women's gathering and it's coming up on February 28th. It'll be a morning full of powerful worship, teaching, and a conversation you're not going to want to miss. So make sure you sign up for that if that's something that you're interested in. Next, we have Get in the Game, which is our way of being able to help you connect with some of our different serving teams here. And so if you've been watching for a while or been attending for a while and you want to take a next step, then Get in the Game is the perfect opportunity for you because it'll help you get plugged in some teams where you get to do life and ministry together. I know I've made a lot of friends with the people that I serve with, and a lot of people in our church can testify to that same thing. So if you're looking for a deeper way to get plugged in, that is happening February 15th. That's going on at 5:30 p.m. So come and discover your gifts and find your place on our Game Changer teams. Last thing in our top 3 is CIY Move for our high school students. If you're in 8th grade going into high school, or if all the way up through your senior year, you are eligible for this event. It is, in my opinion, one of the best events that you could ever go to, the best things you could ever attend. And so if you are in high school, if you're that age group or you're going to be in high school next school year, make sure you sign up. There are limited spots and they go fast. So you're not going to want to miss out on it. Invite your friends. Make sure you secure that registration as soon as possible. You can again find that on the app as well. It's our main event for our summer programming for our high school students. So you can find the details, all those things and everything else in the top 3 on the app or on the website. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let's go ahead and get started with the rest of the morning. We'll worship, and I can't wait to see you again next week. Enjoy the online service.
Let's continue to worship, make his name loud, and let's sing this and declare together. We taught you guys this song last week, so I know a name. Let's sing it together.
There As parents, leaders, and a church family, we all want the same thing. We want our kids and students to feel known, connected, and rooted in a faith that lasts. We also know that the road isn't always that simple.
Yeah, each new season brings new transitions, new questions, and new pressures, and no one is meant to navigate those alone. That's why we are so grateful for the way God is moving through our NextGen ministries, and for a season ahead that's packed with opportunities for kids and students to grow in community and deepen their relationship with Him.
This February, our 7th and 8th graders will step away from the noise at Winter Retreat, creating space to build friendships, encounter God, and take meaningful steps in their faith.
And just 1 week later, we're introducing CIY Superstart for 4th through 6th graders. This is a high-energy, faith-building experience designed to help preteens feel confident and connected, especially as they prepare for what's next in their journey.
This summer, our high school students will head to CIY Move. This is an unforgettable week where students are challenged to live out their faith, live it boldly, and discover how God wants to use them right where they are.
And in July, Camp Allendale returns for incoming 1st through 8th graders, a week full of fun, friendships, and intentional moments where kids experience God in ways that they're never going to forget. Each of these moments is more than an event. They're milestones, core memories, and opportunities for connection. They're spiritual seeds planted in the lives of the next generation.
And we are deeply thankful for parents who trust us, for leaders who are investing in the lives of our students, and for a church that believes the next generation is not the church of tomorrow, it's the church of right now. We're excited for what God is going to do in the hearts of our kids and students this summer.
Yeah, this is just the beginning. God is moving in the lives of our kids and students, and this season is filled with opportunities to say yes to what He is doing. So whether you have a child anxiously awaiting middle school, a student ready to go deeper in their faith, or a kid eager for summer camp, there's a place for them here. We're thankful for a church that believes in the next generation, invests generously, and shows up with open hands and open hearts.
Registration for all of our upcoming NextGen events is now open. You can find dates, details, and signups online at victorycc.life/events, or you can also hop on the Church Center app as well. And join us as we celebrate all that God has done and what He has in store for us. We cannot wait to see what He has next.
Who are you becoming? Not who you want to be, not who you used to be, not who you think you should be, but like right now, who are you becoming? Because none of us are standing still. All of us are becoming something. Every habit is shaping us. Every relationship is forming us. Every decision, reaction, shortcut, it's taking us somewhere. Some of us are becoming more guarded, more cynical, more tired. While others are becoming more anxious, more reactive, more defensive. But then there's others who are becoming more generous, more patient, more loving, more grounded. Who are you becoming? Because formation happens sometimes on purpose, sometimes on accident, but either way, formation happens. Sometimes by design, but others by default. But here's the tension. No matter what you believe, none of us will wake up one day and accidentally become the person we'd always dreamed we'd be. No, we drift into patterns. We slide into rhythms. We slowly become who we follow. Now, for some of us, church has played a role in that journey for good or bad. And for others, church has just added pressure without adding peace. Some of you found life at the church. Others found disappointment. And all of that shapes who you and I are becoming. In fact, no matter what you believe, I think you owe it to yourself to slow down and honestly reflect. Who am I becoming? What messages am I listening to? What environments are shaping me? When the pressure shows up in my life, what shows up in me? When things don't go your way, do you become more patient or more irritable? When you're tired, do you become more gracious or more reactive? When you're misunderstood, do you become more defensive or more curious about why that is? When someone disagrees with you, do you need to win, or do you have a desire to learn from them? Who are you becoming? And what's growing in you lately? What's growing faster in you lately? Peace or anxiety? Gratitude or resentment? Hope or cynicism? Because whatever is growing, that's what you're becoming. And what do people to the closest to you experience more of? Your calm or your criticism? Your peace or your distraction? Your encouragement or your impatience? You don't become something in a moment. No, the problem is you and I become something by our direction. And the scary part for most of us is formation happens whether we're intentional about it or not. And so this isn't, hey, am I a good person? It's really about, is the life you're living actually shaping you into the person that you want to become? And if the answer is, I'm not sure, or not really, that doesn't make you a failure. It just means something got in the way. And for a lot of people, that something actually was the church. So many people have baggage with the church, baggage of pressure and guilt. Maybe you were taught that church was a place where you had to clean yourself up before you walked in. I've had young families threaten their kids that they're going to tell me stuff. I mean, some of you carry guilt over what you've done or shame over who you become. And somewhere along the way, your faith stopped feeling like hope. And it started feeling like a reminder every day that you're not enough. So instead of leaning in, you step back, not because you didn't care, but because you were tired of feeling you didn't measure up. And that's why when we go all the way back and see for ourselves, we discover that Christianity did not begin with a belief system. It doesn't begin with buildings and bands and books. In fact, in the beginning, not a lot of doctrine or rules or certainty. Christianity did not begin as a belief system. It began as an invitation to walk with a person. Before anyone believed all the right things, before anyone understood the theology, before anyone changed their behavior, Jesus simply said, come and see. Not get your life together, not fix your past. Hey, you have to agree with everything. No. Jesus just said, walk with me. And walking with Jesus has always been about our direction, not our perfection. In fact, when we go back and see for ourselves, we'll see this pattern of belonging, believing, becoming. Belonging, believing, becoming. Who are you becoming? And I believe every one of us has good intentions. You want to be better. You want to be different. No one wakes up and says, today I want to become more bitter. Today I want to drift further away from who I was designed to be. But here's the truth we don't like to admit. It's our direction, not our intention, that determines who we become. It's our direction, not our intention, that determines who we become. Our habits are taking us someplace. Your pace of life is shaping you. Your calendar is forming you. Your relationships, they're discipling you. Belief alone doesn't determine formation. Following does. Direction does. It is our direction, not our intention, that determines who we become. And here's the scary thing. We can believe all the right things and still be moving in the wrong direction. You can agree with Jesus without actually following him. And that's why Christianity, it doesn't begin with a belief system. It begins with an invitation to come and see. Welcome to week 4 of our series. If you missed a few weeks, you've missed a lot. We're getting a fuller picture of what we're talking about today. I'd love for you to go back and watch on demand, or if you think any of this would be helpful for someone on the edges of faith, you can go and share it with them. We have a Victory Everywhere crowd out there who watches every week from different locations. And today, we're going all the way back to where Jesus had 0 followers. 0 followers. So if you're on the edges of faith or you have some baggage with the church, this might shock you. But at the beginning, nobody who followed Jesus in the first century initially thought, oh, the Son of God. Nobody. In fact, they were all initially unbelievers. They all thought, hey, he's a nice guy. He has some great things to say. Or maybe he fed us. Or he healed my sister. Or he healed my mother-in-law. Of course I want to follow him. The first followers of Jesus really didn't understand who he was. And they thought what so many people thought today. Oh, he's a good teacher. Or he's maybe a healer. Or he's a great chef because he fed so many people. And you know what that means? If you're on the edges of faith and you're just checking Jesus out and you're not really sure what you believe that Jesus is God, oh, well, you're in good company, because neither did the first followers of Jesus. In fact, if you were just to go all the way back to the beginning of Jesus' ministry, you would discover that unbelief is actually a prerequisite. Like nobody Jesus invited to follow him believed all the right things at first. In fact, you can start this whole journey without believing anything. They were all initially unbelievers. And if you grew up in a church, you might remember that one of Jesus's followers, they had a nickname. His nickname was Doubting what? Doubting Thomas. It wasn't till the end of Jesus' ministry that the people who actually touched him and heard him and spent time with him came to real grown-up faith in him. And there's room for doubt with Jesus. Now, there are reasons people don't follow Jesus, but most of them, I don't think they're theological. I think they're personal. I think their life is a mess, or they've got questions, or they've been hurt, or they don't want to walk into a church or feel judged, or they don't want to walk out of a church and feel fake. And underneath it all is, I think it's really this: I'm afraid I can't change. And if I'm honest, that sounds reasonable. Because for most of the history, the religious message was simply this: hey, before you join the church or before you join religion, you need to change, believe, then belong. Change, believe, belong. Change, and then you can join us. Fix your life. Believe all the right things. Behave all the right ways. Once you change everything about your life, then and only then you can join us. And when we go back and see for ourselves, Jesus, he shows up and he says, join me, and you'll change. You can belong before you believe. In fact, they were all initially sinners. They were all unbelievers. Jesus looked at people regardless of their lifestyle, regardless of their obedience, regardless of their knowledge, regardless of their faith, and said, hey, join me and you will change. Belonging, believing, becoming. Belonging, believing, becoming. And from the beginning of Jesus, he didn't start with behavior. It actually started with proximity. Get close to me. Listen to me, follow me, and over time, you're going to look in the mirror and go, oh my gosh, I don't even recognize that guy. It's our direction, not our intention, that will determine who you and I become. Because when we put our life close to Jesus, you will experience the life-changing love of Jesus. And when you do that, you allow the love of Jesus to change the way that you think. And then over time, you will allow the love of Jesus to change the way that you see the world. And you'll allow the love of Jesus to change how you care about the world around you. And that all happened because Jesus' message was join me and you'll change. Belief came later. Commitment came later. Transformation, it came later. But what came first was the movement. Their movement to follow him. And Jesus never asked them to decide before they experienced. He invited them to take a step towards him, to experience life with him before they decided. So today we're going to go all the way back to 29 AD. And if you're a history buff out there, you're probably like, 29 AD. Yeah, that's the year that Caesar Augustus' wife died. And you would be right. This account is historical. There are real people, real places all over this. And to get the context and the understanding of their setting, I'm going to have to take you back to 2,000-year-old Middle Eastern Jewish history. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, that's going to keep me awake. I'm glad I tuned in. 2,000 years ago, Israel was divided into 3 sections like states. There was the northern part was Galilee. The middle part was Samaria. They walked around that. Then the southern part was Judea. And Jesus and the disciples were from little towns all over the northern part in Galilee. And here's why that's important. Because 2,000 years ago, Galilee was where all of the religious schools were. It was the education center of the Jewish world. And back in Galilee, all the children, boys and girls, they would go to school from age 6 to 12. Back then, they didn't have school buildings. They would go to the local Jewish synagogues for school. And every day, they were taught by the local rabbi called a Torah teacher. And the boys were taught everything using the Torah. The Torah includes the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And out of the Torah, the boys were taught math. And I know right now math teachers everywhere are salivating about the word problems that they could use on their students. Like 5 camels plus 2 camels equals a Camelot. I always hated word problems, but back then, the Torah, they taught them math and history and geography. But the main goal is by the time you were 12 years old, think about 12 years old, as a Jewish boy, you were to memorize the whole Torah by heart: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy by heart. And by the age of 12, you would have 265 pages of our Bible memorized. And so the rabbi would look at you and they would go, hey, Genesis 24, and you would tell a cigarette joke, right? Because when Rebecca saw Isaac, she lighted off a camel. Thank you, King James, right? So the goal was to have the Torah memorized by age 12. And ladies, you focused on the other books, Deuteronomy and Psalms and Proverbs and Leviticus, until you were 12 years old, and then you were done with school. Now, this isn't the point I'm trying to make, but this is so interesting that when Jesus quotes Bible verses to women, he almost always quotes verses out of the Psalms because they had studied the Psalms. That was common ground for them. Now, in their culture, when a girl was 12 years old, she was married off. Not that I'm recommending it, I'm just telling you about their culture. But the boys, those who memorized the Torah, they got to continue their education. They were able to go to Jerusalem for this really big celebration that we're going to talk about later called the Passover. Now, they had gone to the Passover all their life, but now they get to participate in their first Passover, meaning they would go with their family to present the sacrifice that was given to pay for the sins of their entire family. This was a huge deal in their culture, and they did this every year. In fact, Jesus did this. Back in Luke 2, every year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover, and they did. And every year since Jesus was born. And when Jesus was 12 years old, they went to the festival according to the custom. That's what Luke says. So when Jesus, after he passed his Torah exams, he got to participate in the Passover. So Jesus was raised just like every other Jewish boy in Galilee, meaning Jesus, he was taught to memorize the Torah and was ready to go on with his education. Now, from the time a boy was 12 to 15 years old, he was enrolled in the Beth Midrash. It was also known as the House of Learning. So for the next 3 years after he memorized the Torah, the goal would be from that time to you were 15 until is to memorize the entire Old Testament by heart. And they would do this memorization and the study part-time. So they would go to school part-time, and then they would learn the family business part-time, because 2,000 years ago, you didn't have a school counselor asking, hey, little Timmy, what are you passionate about? Like, who do you want to become? What are you gifted at? Like, where do you think you see your life taking you? No, they would just look at you and go, hey, what's your dad do? And if you weren't smart enough to get the rabbi gig, that's what you were going to do. So if your dad was a carpenter, I hope you like carpentry. If your dad was a fisherman, you were going to be a fisherman. And so you would go to school part-time, and then you would learn the family business part-time. And if at any time in those 3 years, the Torah teacher looked at you and said, bless your heart, like that, that's never good news. Like the Torah teacher said, hey, you know what? You'd make a great fisherman. Your education was over. Everyone knew you didn't make the cut. You were rejected. You were unqualified. Now, very few were actually qualified. This would be like the odds of you playing basketball growing up and making it into the NBA. So very few were qualified, but the best students moved on, and they got to study under a famous rabbi or the master rabbi, and they called these students the Talmudim. The Talmudim. In English, it actually means disciple. Now, disciple does not mean today what it meant back then. So many people today think, I'm a disciple of Jesus. And for us, discipleship is all about knowing and learning and reading. But that wasn't their goal. Their goal wasn't just to know what the rabbi knows. No, their goal was as a disciple, was to become who the rabbi was. Their goal was about transformation, not just information. It was all about becoming and not just knowing. And so a student says, hey, I want to hear what you have to say. Like, feed me, feed me, feed me, teach me, teach me, teach me, give me something new. Like, this is what a student does. But a disciple, they're not just concerned with learning. A disciple says, I want to be just like you. Exactly like you. Hey, what deodorant are we wearing? We're going to wear the same. None? Oh, okay. Right. I'll do anything I have to do. I'll go anywhere I have to go. I want to be exactly like you. That's Talmudim. That's actually biblical discipleship. So at age 15, after a boy had passed all of his requirements, he memorized the entire Old Testament, he would go to try and find a local rabbi and try to convince to be drafted by him. Choose me if I'm good enough. And here's what they're signing up for. For the next 15 years, so from age 15 to 30, this kid is asking, can I follow you? I want to become just like you. Now, with all of that context, when you go back and look at Jesus' disciples, you discover that Jesus' disciples, most of them were probably 15 years old. So when we envision the New Testament, we shouldn't see Jesus walking the streets of Jerusalem with old wise men with beards. No, 30-year-old Jesus is probably walking around Israel with high school freshmen. And you know what that means? If Jesus first came here today, he would go to the local high school and says, hey, I'm going to teach these freshmen for 3 years, and then I'm going to turn the whole thing over to them. And like, what was Jesus thinking? I mean, they wouldn't have even been seniors yet, but because this is where most of us get stuck when we think about God. When we hear follow me, we immediately think, oh, not me, not yet. I'm not ready, not like this, because you and I have been trained by life and by culture and by religion that God only picks the qualified, the polished, the put together, the people who already look like they belong and they already know everything. But if you're honest, maybe you have a label in your head. And you don't say it out loud, but you live like it's true. You feel unqualified, not enough, not ready, not spiritual to take the step towards Jesus. And for some of you, it's worse than that. You were told by a parent or a coach or a teacher or a church, you were graded, you were measured, you were compared. And so you had to learn this strategy for your life. If I'm going to fit in here, I'm going to have to try harder and prove myself and earn acceptance. And now, you don't fully show up. You don't fully engage. You hold back. You second guess yourself. You stay quiet and in the corner when you should speak up. You play it safe when you were actually made for more. And not because you lack potential, but because you've been living under the label that someone else handed you of not good enough. So I just want you to notice that when Jesus shows up, he does not start out with, you fix this, you prove it, you earn it. No, he starts with an invitation to come and see, belong, believe, become. Now, we know of at least 2 exceptions of a young disciple that we think about. Jesus chose Peter. He was older. He was probably 18 or 20. We know he had a wife, a job. He was a fisherman. And then he also chose Matthew, a tax collector. And if you know Matt's story, you know that means that being a tax collector meant he was a traitor. So not only had he been rejected by his people, he rejected God himself. All right. And so last week we read how Matthew, who became a disciple of Jesus, recorded how Jesus walked out into the wilderness. And Mark and Luke, they give us more detail to that account. But years later, and so everyone has already read the wilderness account, but years later, John talks about Jesus going to the Judean wilderness by the Jordan River. And he gives us this unique insight, some extra details. He puts Jesus back by the river out in the Judean wilderness, and he shows us of a time where Jesus had 0 followers. And we've read this before. Jesus is with John the Baptist. It says the next day John saw Jesus coming toward him, and he said, look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And then John baptizes Jesus. Then Scripture says the next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples, and he saw Jesus passing by. And again he says, look, the Lamb of God. So John tells his followers twice, look, the Lamb of God. That's who Jesus is. And then the 2 disciples heard him say this, and they what? They followed Jesus. So if you're keeping score at home, Jesus gained 2 followers. John lost 2 followers. And get this, these were the very first 2 followers of Jesus. And what we read, they're not all in yet. They weren't permanent disciples yet. They were actually on the sidelines of faith. Their belief came later. Their commitment came later. Their transformation came later. Their movement came first. And these men, they don't really know Jesus. All they know is what John's told them about Jesus. And they don't even know where he's going. And they don't even know, does he want us to follow him? So they follow Jesus, but they follow him at a distance. They've been stalking Jesus. Maybe you have an ex like that, right? But look at what happens next. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" That's one of the most loaded questions in all of the gospel. Like, well, wouldn't that stop you in your tracks? Jesus locking eyes with you saying, "What do you want?" Now, John uses the Greek word, and the definition can be, what are you seeking? What are you looking for? What are you searching for? Or get this, what do you desire? When you go back and look for yourself, Jesus starts this whole journey of faith, not with belief, not with your morality, not with your behavior, your desire. What do you desire? What do you want to become? What are you actually looking for? And if you're on the edges of faith, or maybe stuck in your faith, I think the reason you feel stuck is because somewhere along the way, you were handed a different order of faith. You thought you had to change first, then you could believe, then you could belong. Once you fix your life and believe all the right things and behave all the right ways, then you can follow Jesus and become like him. And when you couldn't do that, what happened? Oh, your faith stalled out. But that's not how following Jesus started. Isn't that good news? That when you go back to the beginning, Jesus says, what do you want and what do you desire? What are you after? What do you think I can do for you? What do you want me to give to your life? Where do you think I want to lead you? And if God really asked you that today, what would you say? How would you respond? What are you hoping that Jesus will fix in your life? Are you looking for security, belonging, peace, forgiveness? Or maybe you're just curious. What do you want? What do you desire? Who do you want to become? What would you say to Jesus? I don't know what you would say, but it freaks these guys out, and they don't know how to respond. So they just ask Jesus a question. They basically just say, Rabbi, meaning teacher. So they're not calling him God yet. They're not calling him Savior or Lord yet. They're on the edges of faith. Teacher, Rabbi, where are you staying? Basically, they're just trying to figure out who Jesus is and what Jesus is about without committing too much to Jesus. So, hey, Jesus, where are you staying? We're not committing to be your disciples. We're just trying to follow you around for a little while, which is admittedly more creepy in our world than in theirs. I mean, especially if they were driving a white van. I mean, if someone comes up to you today in a windowless van asking, hey, where are you staying? You should run. But back then, it was like, no, you're the teacher. We want to come listen to you. We haven't decided that we want to be your followers yet, your disciples yet. And I want you to look at how Jesus responds. He says, come and you will see. The very first followers of Jesus became followers of Jesus because of this invitation to come and see. The Jesus movement began as an invitation to come and see. And John, the Apostle John, he tells us, oh, it's belonging, then believing, then becoming. So they didn't have to behave initially, and they didn't have to believe initially. It's belonging, believing, then becoming. And so they went and saw where he was staying. And then John includes this in detail, and it's so important. They spent the day with him. They spent the whole day interacting with Jesus, the whole day asking Jesus questions. They spent the whole day watching Jesus interact with different people. And the point is not the content of what he taught. No, the point is their proximity. They placed their life next to Jesus. And at the beginning of the day, Jesus has 0 followers. Now he has 2 followers, and they are blown away by their experience with Jesus. And this is where our modern faith, our version of faith, starts to kind of drift from the original. Because most of us were handed this assumptions about God that, oh, you're going to have to change. Now you have to believe. Now you have to become before you can follow. But when you go back and see for yourself, that was never in the text. It's like we think things when we sit in church, oh, once I get my life cleaned up, then God will use me. That's not how Jesus started. If I doubt, I don't belong. Tell that to doubting Thomas. Transformation happens only when I try harder. Jesus never said that. Faith starts with certainty. It didn't for them. God is mostly disappointed with me. I think a lot of people think that. That's not the gospel message. That's not good news. That's just your baggage. Or faith is about answers. Jesus, he started with questions. And none of those ideas are what launched the Jesus movement. No, what launched it was their proximity to Jesus. They hadn't believed everything yet. They didn't behave any differently yet. And they didn't fully understand who he even was. They just spent the day with him. And something started to shift. Not overnight, not instantly, but directionally. Because becoming doesn't start with belief. It starts with who you walk with. And when they put their life in close proximity to Jesus, their desires begin to change. And the same will happen for you. Your perspective will begin to change. Your pace begins to change. Your priorities, they will absolutely change. Not because you were forced to, but because you were formed. Belonging, believing, becoming. Belonging, believing, becoming. Not pressure, not performance, not perfection. His presence. And probably one of the most offensive truths in our culture, and simultaneously one of the most hope-filled truths of our whole life, is that following Jesus changes you. Now, in our culture, that can be offensive. They say, hey, you don't have to change for anyone. But I'm telling you, there is an element of hope that you and I have, that if we actually follow Jesus, things can actually change. And so the goal of following Jesus is not to become more informed, it's to become formed. Who are you becoming? Because there's no spiritually neutral environments. Wherever you place yourself, you're affected. Whoever you position yourself around, it has an impact on you. There are no spiritually neutral environments. In fact, history actually says this is true. There was this disciple in history that before his death, that this is how he described his leader. He says, when he speaks, all resistance breaks down before the magical effect of his words. One can be his friend or his enemy. He divides the hot and cold, but lukewarm he spits out of his mouth. Then he also says this, great joy. He meets me like an old friend and looks after me. How I love him. He speaks, and how small am I. And the person that wrote that almost became a priest. His name is Joseph Goebbels, and he was a disciple of Adolf Hitler. And while others deserted Hitler, Goebbels spent his last days alongside him in Hitler's secure bunker. When Hitler committed suicide, Goebbels and his wife followed closely behind after killing their 6 children. I'm telling you, there are no spiritually neutral environments. You and I were always growing towards something. So who are you becoming? What message are you listening to? What environments are shaping you? Because it's our direction, not our intention, that determines who you and I become. And these first 2 followers of Jesus, they were not won with an argument or a speech. No one knocked on their door and shared the gospel with them or yelled at them with a blowhorn. No, they became the first followers of Jesus because of an invitation to come and see. And John records Andrew, one of the first 2 followers of Jesus, was actually the first of the 2 followers of Jesus. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the 2 that had heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. Now check out what Andrew did. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother, Simon, known as Peter, and tell him, we have found the Messiah, that is the Christ, and he brought him to Jesus. Now this is about evangelism and discipleship. And what do we discover? It's all about proximity. Which if you make this about like anything other than church or Jesus, I think people can totally relate to, because you've probably done this before. You've met someone, or you bumped into someone famous, or you called all your friends to brag, hey, you'll never guess who I saw today. You'll never guess what I got to experience today. You've got to come back and see. That's exactly what Andrew did. After he spent the day with Jesus, the very first thing he did was to get his brother and drag his brother to Jesus. And it says the next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee, finding Philip. And many scholars believe Philip was the second follower and Peter was the third. So now Jesus has 3 followers. And look at Jesus' approach to him. He said, follow me, draw near me, stay with me. You don't have to change anything. You just have to, I'm inviting you to come and see. And Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was one from the town of Bethsaida, which is also in Galilee. So Philip has some motivation to follow Jesus. They're going from the Judean wilderness all the way back up to Galilee, and Jesus is headed north back to his hometown, because that's where Nazareth is as well. So Jesus is leaving on this trip that'll take about 60 miles right, in sandals. This is like walking from Franklin to Scottsburg, Indiana. It'll take 22 hours and 28 minutes if you ask Google Maps. So that's going to take some time. That was an investment. They were intentionally placing their lives right next to the message and the environment and the person of Jesus. And I want you to look what happens. Philip found Nathanael. So just imagine Philip. He's really excited when he says this. He says, hey, we have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, about who the prophets also wrote about, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Nathanael, you gotta see this. And you can't make this up. Nathanael responds, Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? I mean, this is the response maybe you've had before if you've tried to invite people to meet Jesus. You want me to go to church? Can anything good come from there? And if you've experienced that, get this, you can identify with the very first followers of Jesus. And Philip is basically saying, if you think about it, hey, do you want to go on this 60-mile trip with this guy who's from Nazareth? And Nathanael's like, no thanks. Like, why would I want to do that? And in doing that, Nathanael insults Jesus. His cousins, his aunts, his grandma. Nothing good comes from that place. That's not just a comment. It's a full family roast. I mean, and how do you respond to that? It's like, I don't know, the text feels like there's a pause. Like Philip has to be thinking, okay, well, how do I explain this? How do I get him to understand? I just spent the day with Andrew and Jesus, and it was incredible. And I don't have the words to explain it all or to describe it all. I don't know how to convince him, but I want you to look at Philip's response. He simply says, come and see. Don't take my word for it. You come and see. Come check it out. I think I found what I'm looking for. I think I found what we've been looking for. I think we might have just experienced a day with the Messiah. I discovered a truth, a grace, a mercy, a hope that I want everyone to experience. Would you come and see? And that's how the Jesus movement grew. I just spent time following Jesus. That's how the first followers of Jesus became transformed, lifelong followers of Jesus, which leads me to ask, who are you becoming? Not who do you want to be? Not who you wish you were, but right now, who are you becoming? Because you don't become something one day. You become something every day. You and I, we won't drift into the life we want. No, we'll drift into patterns, into bitterness, into isolation, into we're fine, into numbing our problems. You don't drift into joy. You don't drift into peace. You don't drift into becoming like Jesus. No, that takes a step in the right direction. And God doesn't just want you to have information. He forms you by association. Not just what you believe, but who you're close to. So who are you following? What environment are you putting yourself, your life beside? What message are you repeating to yourself? Because Christianity, it did not begin with a belief system. It began with an invitation to walk with a person, an invitation to come and see. And those first followers of Jesus, they had this moment where they had to swallow their own pride and ask, who am I following? And what is that making me become? They had to unfollow, get this, John the Baptist, who everybody thought might be the Messiah. And they unfollowed not because John was bad, but because Jesus was better. And maybe that's the moment you needed today, so that you need to unfollow something that's not bad, but Jesus is better. So I have two challenges, just a self-reflection. What are you following that's forming you without you noticing? Is it a relationship, a feed, a habit, a wound, a fear? A voice in your head that isn't God? Because whatever you follow, you don't just learn it. Unfortunately, you become it. And second question is, what would you have to unfollow to fully follow Jesus? And you might say, Josh, I logged into church. I'm telling you, going to church doesn't make you a Jesus follower any more than standing in your garage makes you a car. What would you have to unfollow to fully follow Jesus? And some of us don't need a new belief. We just need new direction. And here's the best part. Jesus does not say, hey, you go fix all of that. No, he says, follow me. Follow me. Join me, and you'll change. Belong, believe, become. And if you're here thinking, hey, Josh, I'm not sure Jesus is for me, and I'm not sure the church is for me. I'm not sure I believe. I've got some baggage. I've got some hurts and habits and hang-ups. Well, good news, when we go back and see for ourselves, you're exactly the kind of person that Jesus invited to follow him. So the challenge for you is, would you intentionally put your life next to Jesus? Promise to show up in person next week. Sign up for What's Next or get in the game or maybe just sit for 10 minutes this week and pray one honest prayer. Jesus, if you're real, would you come near me? Would you help me? And if you're a Jesus follower, this is where your faith gets real because John the Baptist pointed to Jesus and Andrew pointed to Jesus and Philip pointed to Jesus. So here's your challenge. This week, could you point one person to Jesus to just come and see? I'm not asking you to win an argument or fix them or pressure them. Just love them enough to say, would you come and see and sit with me? Because people don't change when they're pressured. They change when they're close. And if you don't like who you're becoming, Jesus isn't disappointed in you. No, he's inviting you to join him. Not with a checklist, not with some shame, but with the same words he's been saying all along. Would you come and see?